Hi everyone, my name is Sharon Cardosa and welcome back to my channel. On this channel lately we've been talking a lot about classroom management, and it's one of those biggest topics that beginning teachers and even some of us veteran teachers that we struggle with. And while I can't say that my classroom management is perfect every day, I do feel like I've learned a few things in the last 30 years, and I like to pass along some of my tips and tricks that I've learned. So today we're going to talk about entry routines. Routines and procedures in general are very important to classroom management. And I tend to find that when my routines and procedures are getting a little too loosey-goosey in my classroom, either I have stopped, I never really clarified them, or if I've stopped reinforcing them like midway through the year, I find that this is where I tend to run into start having student behaviors that are maybe affecting my classroom management. So when you have clear routines and procedures, okay, then when students start to test those boundaries, you'll be able to reinforce exactly what your expectations are. And believe me, they will start to test your boundaries. So the first thing is that your routines and procedures, the students need to know them. So you should have spent time like explaining them to them at the beginning of the year. But if you are midway through the year and things have kind of gone off the rails a little bit, don't feel like you can't step back, because you always can go back, step back, and either change things up or reinforce what you started with at the beginning of the year. So when there are certain things that should just be like automatic for your students when they come into the classroom, things that they should know and not have to ask you about, like how do we turn papers in? What's expected of me when I come in the classroom? What am I supposed to do? How do we leave the classroom? When we're moving into groups, how does that look? And what am I allowed to do and not allowed to do? So those are things that you need to set your expectations with your classroom from the get-go. And you have to explain them to the students. You have to actually teach them. Sometimes we forget that students' little brains aren't all the way developed, and they're coming to us, and sometimes we just inherently expect them to know things because they've been in classroom settings their entire lives, right? Most of their entire lives. So we expect them to just come with classroom behaviors that are like awesome, but they don't always do that. So I find that if it's something that I expect from them, then I'm going to make sure I teach it to them, whether I feel like they should have learned it in years past or not. So they have to be taught, and the sooner the better. The beginning of the year is the obvious time to teach your classroom rules and expectations, your procedures for how you're going to handle things. But like I said, if things have kind of gone off the rails or you find you need adjustments, then any time of the year is going to be a great time to go back and review those expectations. So if you're going to focus on some things, a place to start would be transition times. In this particular video, we're going to talk about entry routines, but in later videos, we'll probably cover how we leave the classroom and also moving from different activities, because those are also important transition times that can affect your classroom management. So let's talk entry routines. So I work in a middle school, so that means that I am required to stand at my door during the passing period when students are transitioning from one class to the other. And so we've talked in other videos about building relationships with students. So I'm usually at the door saying hello, greeting my students, and that sort of thing. But I'm also supposed to be monitoring all the other students in the hallway outside of my classroom, as well as monitoring what's going on inside of my classroom. So that's a lot to take in all at once. So talk about multitasking, right? So there are several things that can help you with this. First of all, and I would say probably the most important, is where you position yourself at the beginning of the period. So hopefully you've kind of taken a few minutes at the end of the period, the previous period, or before school started to like set your classroom so you're not running around trying to get all those things done, and you are at the door and you're greeting your students. So I like to position myself kind of like at the corner of the door where I can see outside the door and I can also see what's going on inside of my classroom. Because I have to be aware and I also have to be visible. Just being visible to your students will often prevent a lot of behavior problems. That visibility is key, and you have to be aware. So not just like engaged in an in-depth conversation with a student like one-on-one, but your eyes should be roaming and you should be looking at what's going in the hallway. You should be talking to students and you should also be glancing over it to what is happening in your classroom. Seems like a lot, but as you do it, you'll get better at it, and it will be more and more. You'll be like, okay, I got this. When my students come into my classroom, I usually have some sort of a slide on the screen that gives directions. Usually it will say what materials they're supposed to start taking out. So they come in and they start getting themselves situated. They start taking materials out of their backpack. They're going to need a pencil. They're going to need their agenda. They're going to need maybe an assignment from yesterday, maybe their Chromebook today. So I always have that on the slide at the start of the period so that they know what they should be taking out. And if they need to sharpen their pencil, it's a great time to go and get that done. So if they don't have certain items, like let's say they don't have a pencil or they don't have a Chromebook, then I have taught them that we have procedures for that. And in my classroom, they wait until after I've taken attendance, and then I will just kind of generally say, is there anyone who needs a pencil? Is there anyone who needs a Chromebook? And so forth, so that I have sign out procedures for items, especially expensive items like Chromebooks. So there are procedures for that in place if they don't have their materials. I also have an agenda on the board. And in this way, students can look at the agenda, they can see what we're going to do today, and I don't have to answer the question, what are we doing today, Ms. Cardos? Like 50 times. So it just prevents that. And the kids all know, after the first couple of days, oh, I can just look at the board and I can see what it is we're going to be doing today. Usually when they ask me that question, I say, math. They don't like that answer, but it's the truth. It's what we're doing today. We're doing math. So when I give them the agenda on the board, it frees me up a little bit. I also have a seating chart, and this to me is very important because the first couple of days of school, like maybe day 1, 2, or 3, I usually let students sit wherever they want, and it kind of helps me see which students I need to separate like right away. Because usually those first couple of days, they are more quiet than they are going to be all year long. So the first couple of days, I tend to let them sit where they want. They almost always gravitate towards their friends. And I can see if there are any little combinations that are going to give me, that are going to be really talkative or whatever while I'm talking. And it helps me just, prevent a few problems down the road. But I do have a seating chart. And if I come in and students are saying, can I sit next to so-and-so? I always say no. From the get-go, I say no. And the reason I do that is because it's quicker for me to take attendance if they're all in their assigned seat. And then later on, they know that if we're going to move into a group activity, let's say we're doing partner work and someone's partner is not there today, I will move students around and allow them to move at that time. Or if we're doing group work and I need groups of 3 or 4, I will possibly let them work with their friends at that time. And sometimes I give them free choice of whether they would like to work alone or in groups. So, but the seating chart just helps me prevent any issues from the beginning with students, taking up class time with the, can I sit next to my friend today? Just no, they don't even ask me anymore. Many teachers will have a warm-up on the screen or what's called a bell ringer. So what that might look like, say for math, it might be 3 to 5 questions on the screen. That could be a review from yesterday's lesson or even a previous grade level. And it's probably going to lead into what we are going to do today. It could be a prerequisite skill of something that we're going to do today. And it should be something that they can complete on their own. They should not need a lot of help from me while I'm taking attendance or what have you. They're working on their warm-up or their bell ringer. It shouldn't take any more than 5 minutes start to finish. I have been in some classrooms where teachers just stretch this period out for like a really long time, and then they wind up getting dinged on their observations for it. So just keep in mind that if you're doing some sort of do now or warm up or bell ringer, that it should be something short and quick, and definitely take the time to go over whatever the answers were to the problems. Okay, don't just leave them hanging or some sort of like self-checking thing. It also, when you have that warm-up or agenda period, it gives time for the kids who are notoriously tardy. It gives them time to kind of like ease into the classroom as well, and you can take care of those issues. And then after that, I will just jump into my slides with announcements and maybe straight into the lesson for today. Now, let's say you're having trouble with your classroom entry routine. I've got a couple of quick fixes that you can try. So first of all, if things aren't going well as a whole class, take the time to review your expectations. Take 5 to 10 minutes in a period and just review, this is what I expect to see when you come into my classroom, and be very clear about it. Quick fix number 2, have students practice the entry routine. Whatever it is you want them to do, have them practice it. And if they aren't doing well at it, have them go back outside and re-enter the classroom. Now, you do have to be careful with this one because I have seen some teachers like overuse this one, and then students will start to misbehave on purpose just so they can go waste class time standing outside the door, going in and out of the classroom. So do it once, maybe twice, but don't go overboard with it. Have students line up outside the door and only let a few students in at a time. This is going to take a couple of your instructional minutes if you're going to do it this way, but in years past, like let's say a class that's right after lunch, or maybe a 6th period, end of the day class or whatever. I have a class that they've just come from PE, they're all wound up. I have them stay outside the door, and then I only let a few of them in at a time, and as those are getting seated, I'll let in a few more. And it just helps make it more efficient for me to be able to watch what's going on outside the door and what's going on inside the door. If you use a group like point system or some sort of classroom currency, this is an excellent time to reward students for them following your directions and your expectations. And if you don't have that type of system set up in your classroom, positive reinforcement will go a long way. So just saying to a student, I like the way Lucy already has out her pencils today and her materials. I like the way Jasper, I like the way you came in so quietly today. Thank you. Just taking a couple of moments to acknowledge those students that are doing what they are supposed to be doing. But the point system, the group point system, works terrific in middle school. If it's only a couple of students that you're having a problem with, and you can pinpoint who those 2 or 3 students are who are having trouble at that entry point, then take the time to talk to those students individually. Don't waste your class period by talking to a group of 30 students when you really only need to talk to 2 or 3 students about how the routine should be going at the beginning of the period. And have those students repeat back to you what your expectations are. Don't just you talk at them, but say, I just want to take a minute to review. So can you tell me what are the expectations for entering into the classroom? And have them tell you what they are. And then when you're greeting them at the door, the next day, just like, reminding them, maybe you have a signal with them, a special signal that will remind them, hey, we're coming in. I need you to take it down. Like, take it down a notch, or something of that nature. And then one of my favorite things to do to help students get back on track during this time period is just to ask them, is there anything that you need to get started? How can I help you? How can I help you get started? And lots of times they just need a pencil, and they've been standing up, going around asking everybody, could they borrow a pencil? And I just remind them of what the procedures or the expectations are for those types of things. So if you take the time to perfect your entry routines, I promise you it will reduce your stress in the class, and it will also reduce the stress of your students. So this is a time period in your class when horseplay will start to go on, trash talk will start to go on, and this 5 minutes can be the most important 5 minutes of your whole lesson because it is going to set the tone for the rest of this class period. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any suggestions for entry-level routines that you do, please make sure to drop it in the comments below. If you've liked this video, give it a thumbs up and be sure to click subscribe so you'll be notified when the next video comes out. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.